Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining our webinar series, Improve Salesforce for Life Sciences Organizations. I'm so excited today to be joined by Kevin Hospodar from Steady State Media, who's going to talk to you about how to optimize Pardot for your life sciences organization. He's got loads of really cool things to share, such as common use cases for Pardot, some academic theories, some in-the-field applications, and you're going to have a really good time with the information that Kevin has to share for you today. We've got a series that will be running the same day, the same time, one Thursday a month, and our next one will be a panel event that's going to be really exciting, where we have an esteemed panel of folks with loads of experience in life sciences who are going to be talking about 2023 trends that we see coming in life sciences and the implications that has for your Salesforce organization. So you won't want to miss that one. We've got a few more planned for the beginning of 2023. And then starting in the spring, we've got some really exciting live events for you. We're going to be doing lunch and learn panel conversations in Philadelphia, Boston, and RTP. And following that, we're planning a 2-day Life Sciences Dream In live event that you will not want to miss. Anybody who's attended today's webinar or any other webinar will receive the recording of the webinar as long as, or as often as we can send it out to you. You will see more information about the life sciences dreaming opportunities that we have coming up for you. So you'll get a call for speakers, you'll see a call for sponsors, and then you'll start to see agenda and registration information. Anyone who attends our webinars will receive a discount code to attend our live events. They are sure to be packed with information and amazing networking with other professionals in life sciences. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have questions as the webinar is running, please put them in the Q&A box, and Kevin will try to address them if it makes sense in the moment or after the webinar is over. We are so excited to share this information with you today. And Kevin, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. Really excited about this, and I will get things kicked off here on our first of the webinar series, talking about Pardot/MCAE. So move here. So my name's Kevin, as Shannon mentioned. I'm a marketer at heart. I've been working in Pardot since 2011, been in Salesforce since about 2004. I've always been in the marketing side for B2B, marketing automation, a little bit of the channel sales, so a little unique there, but also worked quite a bit in life sciences, tech, some higher education in a mix there. So while I am not a strictly lifer in the life sciences realm, I think I bring some pretty unique perspectives and kind of can see those things that maybe are a little bit outside of the bubble of life sciences. I like bad metaphors, so excuse me if I go through any of these. A lot of them have to do with building houses, sometimes about fishing, so we'll try to keep those to a minimum. But just to kind of get things going here of just the agenda for today. One, we want to talk about Pardot versus MCAE, there's a lot of names that get thrown around, and we were just even commenting of how sometimes in documentation, other places, they kind of get to be distributed. So MCAE is Marketing Cloud Automation. Pardot is the marketing automation platform that is part of Salesforce. We're going to kind of do a level set on Pardot as a product, kind of talk a little maybe about history, can tell you what it does, what it doesn't do, and then do some comparisons on other places. There's 3 main points that I wanted to talk about that we can kind of walk through in the idea of theory versus application. And when I say theory, it might just be the way that you're using it right now, of using a tool similar to Pardot, or how maybe you're just kind of doing some cheats or some manual processes that could be dealt with automation. So kind of the theory and like what you're really trying to do, and then the application of like, hey, this is what Pardot will look like, or this is what Pardot can do, or here's something you might not even think about that's maybe afforded to you, and you're in a process that's manual. If it becomes automated, you don't have to worry about it. This can be an interactive presentation. I'm not going to be doing a demo, and I'm not going to be jumping through reading slides and reading bullet points are kind of the way that I work, and a lot of it too is conversation. So happy at any point there's someone raises their hand and puts in a question, has their information at some point to jump into like a live demo instance and kind of go through those different pieces and answer very specific questions. But I'm going to try to talk in generalities and try to just at least get everyone at like kind of a base understanding of Pardot/MCAE. And this might be the last time I actually use the acronym MCAE too. So Level set on Pardot. It's Pardot, not Pardot. That's one thing that no one will correct you, but there's a lot of times that you see people reading that a little differently. Pardot is actually, I think it's a Latin term that meant to sell or to market. So whenever it was developed in 2007 by a group out of Atlanta, that was kind of where they came from. So it was a strange word to kind of get kicked off. In that space, I started using Pardot in about 2011. And so it was a standalone product. It had integrations into a bunch of different CRMs and ERPs, and it was just kind of plugging and playing into different places. In 2011, things weren't that robust yet either. So it didn't have that consolidation of a lot of these different point solutions into larger platforms. It was great for emailing. It was great to kind of almost work as a database and have a place for marketers to work and to be able to look at lists and be able to send out emails. So that was really the foundation, the core of the product when it started. 2012, ExactTarget purchased it, and then not there that much further after. Well, it's shown as a year in the dates there. I think it was only about 7 or 8 months that Salesforce then acquired ExactTarget. So there wasn't a big change, and I think that's one thing to think about when you look at Pardot as a whole. That as it made those jumps from a standalone organization and a standalone piece of software to where it came to Salesforce, they didn't have a lot of time to put an ExactTarget skin on it or to change things around and to move things and maybe develop it. So a lot of the stuff that you see in Pardot today is legacy all the way back to like that 07, 08, 09, 12, like before the ExactTarget acquisition. So sometimes that's a knock that people have against it, that it doesn't have as flashy of an interface if they're coming from a HubSpot or a MailChimp or some other of those products that have really nice UI, UXs. A lot of functionality behind it, but it is simple interface. One thing too that to kind of level set is that Pardot looks at records across the board and calls them prospects. In Salesforce, that's leads and contacts. In Salesforce, the unique identifier is usually an alphanumeric code. In Pardot, it's the email address. And so while there's a lot of different OEM instances of Salesforce where you can change those categorizations from partner to lead, contact, whatever you kind of call it, if it's patient, if it's whatever they are, just know on the Pardot side, it's always thought of as a prospect. And as a marketing person, I think that helps clear things up. No matter what industry you're working on, you're thinking of as a record inside of Pardot as a prospect and records inside of Salesforce as leads, contacts, partners, all those pieces. So I try to keep that language of Pardot records, Salesforce records, so whenever we talk about going back and forth, but there are differences in the naming there. Main takeaway, Pardot is email, Salesforce is a unique identifier to each record. So in Salesforce, you could have 2 email addresses and have them be 2 records. In Pardot, it does not allow for that duplication. It only allows it for 1 email. So what is Pardot? And I think the easiest way to do this is just to kind of look at their menuing structure. And I don't think that we need to jump into a screen share to like kind of look and go deep to understand this, but they really bucket things into 4 places: marketing, prospects, reports, and admin. And so as you look at that, and I kind of just broke out each one of those main headers to kind of see what's in there. The marketing side of things is kind of what you really work on. You have to think about Pardot is an automation platform. And you think about marketing automation as being able to set up if-then statements. So as you put people into a process or into automations, things happen in the background without you having to worry about them. That's really the core of Pardot, is that things can happen, actions can take place, someone can interact with your content, your website, all those different places, and something happens on the back end. It's not a manual process. So you jump down through there. The main core tool that I've always seen Pardot as an emailer is that it's a mass emailer for sending list emails, or it's also now an emailer for integrations into Salesforce for sending out emails. And the great thing there is it's sent from a platform that's tracked. So everything that's in there, it's cookie-based tracking. There's it's a pretty robust tracking system, while it sounds pretty simple. On the prospect side, while it has the email capability, it is also a database builder. There's ways for leads to be created. There's ways for you to import leads, but you have a full list of all of your records inside of Pardot, and they sit there. Reporting, pretty easy reporting that kind of based off of reporting off of like activities of like if you send an email, or activities of who's visiting your website. It's all those kind of marketing reports that are built there. The nice thing is it also, we'll talk about this later on, is that it's pulling information from Salesforce. The Salesforce information is making it over into Pardot into places there. The admin side, like that's not as fun and as interesting, but it is notable to say that like it is a separate platform in the admin sense in the user configuration. So if you have sales users, marketing users, admin, management, you can set up priorities and you can kind of set up who can access information and set up visibility that way. So it does have its own access and admin functionality separate from Salesforce. So you can set those all up and all your visibilities inside Salesforce. You can set them up differently inside of Pardot to allow for unique profiles to have unique views and data exposure there. So just a quick, again, level setting to kind of understand what Pardot is. There's a lot of people that use Salesforce without Pardot, and it's probably safe to say that if you're watching this, you're one of those people that don't have Pardot yet. You may be using different systems like that are on the right-hand side, and my fancy graphic that talks about a brick wall. It literally is a brick wall to get through. You think about Constant Contact, MailChimp, anything that's out on the App Exchange, Active Campaign, anything HubSpot, things you'd find on Trust Radius. Go to G2 Crowd and looking for marketing automation platforms. Or if you're even doing one-to-many kind of in the channel side of things, if you're using a PRM, if you're using a partner management platform, all of those things, there is a wall now because Pardot and Salesforce are native together. So there is some way that you've got to cross that wall. If that wall is a Excel sheet, if that wall is a Zapier integration, if that wall is a manual process, no matter what, there is the inherent native connectivity of Pardot and Salesforce. Put up that wall to make all the other applications, all the other pieces of software not equal. The biggest thing, and I kind of mentioned there, this is the dreaded folder. And if you are, depending on who you are, if you are in management, if you're a marketing specialist, if you're a marketing director, any level that you sit in the organization, you need to know about this folder. There's a folder. I have them on my desktop. I have them in my trash bin. But this folder is where someone says, we want to communicate to these people. We want to send a newsletter to these people. We want to send something to these people. Or we want to communicate with these people. Or we want to go and put these people into a group and do something. It's back to this wall. That's your key, or that's your little ladder to get over the wall, is an Excel sheet. And that folder sits on your desktop, and it sits somewhere that is a moment in time CSV Excel export that someone took a lot of time to build, someone took a lot of time to maintain and to check and to configure all the fields. But the biggest thing, and I think this is really important to think for the life science industry, is the risk of those Excels. Your whole entire database can sit in multiples on an Excel sheet or inside of a folder that someone loses their laptop, someone leaves your organization, someone on the sales side, someone on the support side. As a marketer and working not only as a consultant, but also working with different companies or being internal, you always have salespeople when they join of like, oh, I've got a list. Oh, I know some people from here. Someone I used to talk to. What this is your data that they're taking with them. And so allowing for your ladder to get over that wall into Salesforce from those other apps is a huge risk. And so it seemed a little funny to think about this folder, but this folder has such large implications across your organization, just to be aware that it exists. And as much as you think that you have your processes nailed down, if you're not using a native app, you're having to use a list at some point. So talking about then Salesforce with Pardot, it's one database in a bidirectional sync. And I say one database, and there's one, and I like this graphic because it talks about these kind of pulled out drawers and folders. So maybe Salesforce in your Sales Cloud pieces are one drawer, Pardot is another drawer. You can have information that's separate to each other, but with just a click of a button and just an easy field map, that data is exposed across those pieces. So all that's in the database, it's just a matter of what you're going to see. The whole idea of that Excel sheet of importing, exporting, doing all of that process that's going to cheer up, it's going to chew up employee like time and hours, and the risk is all gone. All that stuff stays on the cloud, and it's done through automations where you're putting people onto lists or you're doing actions against certain records. It is no longer offline onto a laptop, onto a computer, into an Excel sheet, even into Teams or wherever you're putting those in different places. The cool thing too is that marketing all of a sudden has their own platform. There's a lot of marketers that jump into, like I said, they're coming from a HubSpot, from a MailChimp, from a Marketo, from a a PRM system from all those different places, and they're used to having kind of their own separate platform that they work in, whether or not they're sending emails, if they're setting up automations, if they're doing tracking on the website, if they're running Google ads, if they're doing all those things, they're off of Salesforce and they're doing those in separate places. Pardot brings it together, but also kind of gives you your own separate room. I talk about a bad metaphor. If it's a house that Pardot is the living room and Salesforce is the dining room, like they're there, they're connected. You can walk back and forth if they're under the same roof. Giving marketing their own space to be able to do those things, to have the reporting that they need, to be able to see records and interact with records in the ways that they need to, not so much in the progression from converting contacts and doing a lot of the sales activity, but seeing them from marketing activity. That separate platform is something that marketers really value. So jumping into some theory here about segmentation, I use the phrase segmentation. It means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but whenever I start to think of segmentation, it's how do you take your large database and how do you find and talk to people you want to talk to? So it's how many people in our database have done this? How many people in our database live in this area? How many people have opened up an email, opened up a link, interacted with a PDF on our website, filled out a form, filled out a certain form? Like any of those questions where you start to say, what population of our database has done this, or what population of our database do we want to talk to about this? That's also where those Excels come into. You have that slice and dice. You've got that person that knows how to do the pivot tables and the VLOOKUPs and can recite all of those Excel formulas whenever you start to give them a database and say, okay, here's all the people that opened up an email, or here's whatever those things are. There's someone that you usually have to go to. If you don't have to go to someone, you're probably that person. But there's a lot of offline computations that have to go to as you start to segment and build your database. The problem with that is there's room for error, and it's also just a static shot in time. If you do something on a Monday to send an email on a Thursday, you're not taking account of any of the activity that happens in those days in between. So segmentation is just that. It's segmenting your database. I mentioned about Pardot and Salesforce being separate, but being the same. A quick little screenshot here. On the left is Pardot, on the right is Salesforce. You can see that they connect back and forth. It's one click to go from record to record. So that segmentation and that ability to be able to see people in Pardot, to be able to see them in Salesforce, add them to lists, to jump back and forth, just as easy it is to click that link, all of the data goes back and forth. So if it's a score, if it's they opened up an email, if your sales team wants to say, hey, who opened up an email last week, that information is readily available to them, and you don't have to build that segment. They have that at their fingertips. The really powerful part of segmentation is that any piece of data that sits inside of a record inside of Salesforce can be in Pardot, and you can run an automation. And the idea of an automation is it's the power behind segmenting. The way that you would do this unautomated would be say, hey, Kevin, we want to send an email to everyone in the state of Pennsylvania. So then you've got to go in, you've got to pull that, you've got to query, you've got to make a report, you've got to do all these things. Versus on the Salesforce side and the automation side, you can go into any piece of information and write if-then logic to it. If this, then that. If they meet this criteria, put them to the list. If they don't meet this criteria, remove them from the list. Do all those things. The segmentation is all done as automations, and it's all done online in the cloud, and it's not done on your computer, and it's not done in an Excel sheet. Static versus dynamic is one thing that's pretty important, like I mentioned too, of that if you're looking for these lists and these segments to be just slices in time, which becomes problematic because you miss people. But if you say that, hey, we need to do this for the end of the quarter, we need to know exactly like that at midnight that night, so you can make it a static stop. Or these can be dynamic as people kind of go through your process in different levels of engagement, or if you need to interact with them in a different way, whatever those queries would be, that they can be dynamic where people are flowing in and out of lists and in and out of segments. So static versus dynamic, and it's just any data that exists inside of Salesforce is now able to be queried against and make it dynamic. Moving over to messaging. So as a marketer in any industry that you're in, the important thing about messaging is flexibility, scalability, and availability / accessibility. So the flexibility meaning that you can create messages and have them say all kinds of different things. Scalability is you can send them out in mass. You want to send a message to one person on one-to-one, or do you want to send it to 1 to 100,000? The idea that you could still scale that same message. Availability and accessibility is also an issue too. When you think about those disjointed platforms that I talked about, that brick wall in between, your sales team might not have visibility into a HubSpot, or your field representatives might not be able to see the data that's in constant contact. The accessibility of data and the accessibility of activities and what they're doing, that's also very important in messaging. And you need to be flexible of that you can change those messages and use templates and use starting points where you're not recreating each time. Similar to what we're talking about with segmentation, that you're not starting from scratch and having to do a new query each time. So the design plus the message equals the communication. And usually when you're creating, for example, a newsletter or an email outreach, or you have to, any type of communication, that's kind of the end point. You design, you write, and then you put it together and you make a communication that you put it out. The problem is that's only the start of it. And you think about what you're trying to communicate is that's the communication is not the end point. It wasn't, hey, we got that email out, great, we're done now. The email is just the catalyst to really get into what you need now in the messaging, the importance of the messaging. And I put this in here as these kind of like three pieces of like, is it files? Is it links to your websites? Is it emails? What are all those things? And what are you going to do with the information that comes in? So if you're sending out a file, if you have a PDF, if you have a link to your website that has some important new update, if you have an email that is putting information, you have a form where you need people to put in information, all of that, it's great because you've taken that from the message to now that you've got an action or something you're trying to get them to do. But then on the back end, how are you going to circle back around? How are you going to segment off that? How are you going to set up the next progressive piece for them to go? Or how you can even engage that interest level? If someone looks at progressive scoring, or if they look at the MQL process of like, how do you get someone that they're qualified out of marketing that they're handed over to sales or BD? That process is lost if you think that the communication is the endpoint. The endpoint is being able to measure the interaction that your people have and then circle it back through to make business decisions based off of that database and the messages that you sent them. That comes back around to reporting. And the idea of reporting is the kind of the what if reporting wasn't just the linear endpoint. You sent an email, this is your open rate. You send an email, this was your click-through rate. And great, you've got your marketing reports. I mean, that's a pretty typical one you see off of an email send. Or you run a campaign and you do some direct mailing, you do some digital, you do some things on the website. Someone fills out a form, they attend a webinar, great. That's an endpoint. And then your campaign or your program is seen as complete. But what if that reporting was then closed loop back up and that became your segmentation for the next progressive reporting? And these circles kind of build off of each other, almost like the Olympic rings. They keep on just kind of going down the line. And there isn't a start process there, because once you start the first time and you say that our database and we're going to do something, that you're making branches and trees, you're doing automation inside of Salesforce based off that activity, you're tracking it over to Pardot and you're putting it through the whole way. So the idea that reporting is never really the endpoint. The reporting is the segmentation that allows you to communicate, that gets you your reporting, that allows you to segment, that allows you to communicate, and it's always just progressively building on top of it. The idea that if you're just looking at reporting as being the end goal to say the measurement of success, that's that static piece of you can't really put the wall at the end. You want to be able to look at how is the reporting influencing the segmentation, that's influencing the communication, that's influencing the reporting, that it's just all the way looped back up. So I'm gonna take a breath there that we've covered the segmentation, the messaging, reporting to put all of these pieces together. That's really the theory and the kind of application of it across the board. When you look at Pardot, that allows you to pick and choose how you're going to do that. Do you want to do it through links? Do you want to do it through emails? Do you want to do it through hosted pieces on your website? Is it through forms? It's that collection process, and it's done natively inside of Salesforce. So I'll throw it back of that. Any process and any piece of software that you're now using to do any of the things that I've just been mentioning, there is that brick wall, and that same brick wall graphic, that there is a point where you're introducing risk and you're introducing human error, and you're spending a lot of time to do those things when they can be natively done inside of one system. Talking about that reporting, you can see this is a screenshot of inside of Pardot. This is a prospect, and this is what it looks like. The great thing is, I was talking about, this is a separate platform for marketers to come in. You're able to look at activities, and I was talking about that reporting side. So you look on the right side there, that any activity that's done against a prospect, there's a list of it, there's a tracking, there's a score, and it progressively builds. The purple influences the green, which then up to the red, you can always click that button and go back over to Salesforce and see it there. So the idea that you're progressively building a interaction with a person and an individual, and you have all that at one point. So if you look at on the right-hand side, there's all these emails that were sent to my account. And some of them are test emails, and some of them are visits to websites. I've done custom redirects, all those things. Each one of those would have been an individual report. Each one of those would have been a data point for, okay, that first email, that second email, the website, those would all have been scattered across multiple reports that would have never allowed the visibility of a single prospect to see that. You would have been looking into different applications, different point solutions to hopefully get some type of visibility onto a record. Right now, you can see it per person, and with that little click inside of the red circle up there, you would jump right over into the Salesforce record, and all this information would still be visible. Sales, BD, management, everyone would be able to look on the granular level to see, hey, look at Kevin. What was he doing? Why is his score 1,900? All of his information and the kind of the pieces that lead to it would all be visible. So I know I kind of blew through some things at a very high level. There's a lot of unique use cases inside of life sciences. There's a lot of unique, very specific ways that you'd want to use information. I've tried to kind of set this up as a high level to think of that any information you have in Salesforce, you can have in Pardot, and any information that's in Pardot can be in Salesforce. They are synced together and they're a single place. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm happy to do 100 demos of 100 different ideas and kind of walk through those things. But at a very high level, just trying to understand, breaking down that brick wall and making linear processes of how marketing, sales, and reporting kind of come back together. So I'll take a break here too and look and see if there was any questions that came through over here on the chat, and if there are things that we can. I won't be able to address kind of like specifics of like individual use cases, but we'd be happy to do that on a demo instance here in the future. So my information's up on the screen here. Feel free to reach out via email, also to LinkedIn, any social media platforms, but happy to talk through high level of mapping these processes out, or very granular looking at single automations to kind of fix maybe a broken business practice or some place that you feel that there's maybe a waste of time or there's exposed risk in your organizations or in your processes with taking things offline. So appreciate everyone joining today. Hope there was some great information there. And one last thing that I'll leave you with is that as you are making decisions on pieces of software or solutions that you're using, you have to look at that native integration. And no matter what you do, what piece of software you choose, there's always going to be that brick wall. Pardot is growing inside of Salesforce, as you can see with the MCAE and the marketing cloud and side of things, that it's always going to be there and it's always going to be an integral part of Salesforce. So there's a lot of hesitation. People think of like, oh, well, we'll just kind of stick with what we have now, and kind of every month, every year that you're doing it, you're losing out on the reporting and the data that you could have had, and it's not going to be going away. There's like kind of no better time to start than now, because you're just missing on data every day that you kind of will push it off. So great. Shan, I see you're back on here.
Yeah, Kevin, we do have a question that is a sort of general question about using Pardot for account-based management. So many people in life sciences are looking to penetrate white space in different areas. So let's say that they've got a lot of really good contacts in CNS, but they're looking to find more contacts in oncology. Does Pardot help to find white space inside of accounts that you're already penetrating that exist?
Yes, so I think that it has the tools to do that. I think it's also still down to the process of the organization, of that structure of accounts, leads, contacts that you're leveraging inside of Salesforce or your OEM instance, that all carries over and all that maps through. So you're able to see and group and report based off of any of that hierarchy. And so to kind of talk about that you could run reports that if you said, here's our top 10 performing accounts, and here's our top 10 underperforming accounts. And we're going to group those together and kind of make comparison reports. Or we're going to be doing like a, any piece of data that you wanted to do of how many records are underneath there, how many times have they interacted with our content. Let's build a progressive score of those 10 organizations that we have. We know that there's 10 contacts inside of each one of them. Let's take all 100 of those people and kind of like build out like a median, like just interactivity level. Let's take our underperforming ones and see what's missing there and kind of do a comparison analysis. Okay, great. The ones that are performing really great, they're opening our emails, they're clicking our links, they're doing these things. The ones that aren't, they don't do those things, and maybe they're not in the segments or we haven't categorized them correctly. So I think that while Pardot has tools to help you do that, and if we could come up with an idea of like, great, let's really target those 10 accounts, let's send an email, let's do a progressive nurture campaign, how can we put information in front of them? It's only going to do what you're able to measure. So if you're not measuring those things, and if you don't have any records there, it's not going to fix that for you. And the automation and all the great fancy tools, they can't fix a bad process. But what they can do is they can allow you to identify maybe some lagging, and the ones that are excelling, find those indicators and find out what they're doing that are touch points, that things that are interacting with. And then you can say, great, how do we get those in front of the other underperforming accounts? Hopefully that answered the question. I know it's a little bit vague without an exact example there. Life sciences too. Life sciences too. I think that's one of the things that there's such a progressive profiling of like, as you put a record into Salesforce, there's such a difference of how you communicate with people if they're on the site side, a patient side, if they're maybe if you're selling direct at any point, or if there may be if it's a partner, if it's a supplier. Like there's so many different types of profiles. And as you build out that robustness inside of Salesforce, all of that is leveraged downstream into Pardot. Of that, if you say, okay, if it's a record type, or if you say the account type, or whatever little piece of granular information you're using right now in Salesforce to build that Excel sheet and to populate that horror folder that you've got of all those sheets, that is all automatically can be carried over with a simple mapping. Say, great, take this field, map it to this field, and then you run your automations and say, you have all of those then separate. Like what would have been a report of like, hey, let's run a report to see how many people are site managers. You run the report, you take a look, you got to export, you're doing all those things while that could just always be running. And all you have to do is click on that list inside of Pardot and say, great, we've got 2,000 site managers, or how many site managers are in a certain region, because that's the rep, the field manager is going to talk to them. All that is progressively building all the time. And it just sits there behind the scenes working. And whenever it comes down to make a quick business decision, or you need that information at your fingertips, you just click the link and you open it up and it's there. You're not having to wait to like go to your Salesforce admin to ask to run a report or to do these queries. And then like, well, there's 3,000 people. We think there should be 6,000. What's missing? Where's the data broken? And you're going backwards to fix them. As you build those pieces inside of Pardot, you've ensured that the architecture is correct.
I think you started to answer the second question that we have, which is, since life sciences is such a deep ecosystem, right? You've got the site side, the patient side, CROs, sponsors. Is there a particular side of life sciences that you think benefits most from Pardot, or one that you don't think that would benefit from Pardot? Or is this an application that can work pretty well across the entire life sciences ecosystem?
I think it's that whole idea of segmentation. I think that's knowing that you're doing your profiles and your personas. And I think that's I think that inside of every organization, you know that inherently, that you know if it's a patient side, if it's the site side, if it's a manufacturer, if it's a supplier, you know the intricacies of those, and you have people in your organization that know those. So it's just a matter of mapping those out and using the right tool for the right job. So I think that there's the idea of that email is a great way to communicate, but there's also the idea too of that if you're sending one-off emails, that you're giving your team or whoever's sending those emails that if they're going to send out PDFs, or they're going to send out forms that need to be filled out, or they're sending out links to things, using custom redirects where then you're tracking when people open those things. They're tracking whenever the links are clicked. Using that of like, okay, is that an indicator that someone is looking to show some interest and I need to follow up with them? Or is if they click that, is that them showing maybe that they're not interested because I sent a link that would kind of be a disqualifier versus something that's raising their hand. So it's configuring those things to meet that persona and to find out, like reverse engineering what you think is success to each one. It is so deep, and there are so many different ways that you kind of can slice and dice it. It's a matter of just saying, great, we're going to deal with this persona now, we're going to deal with this one and deal with these ones. And you can cut and paste and just make a little tweak. If it's, like I said, I was talking about sites. If you say that it's these 10 states, and then we want to do the next one as these 10 states, it's cut and paste and just a quick little edit versus in maybe other systems, it's a whole lift everything up, take it over here and then recreate that. And that recreation process is usually error ridden because it can be a menial process and it can be something that's an intense, laborious process that's not exciting as it is the first time to do it the 5th time or the 6th time. So cloning and copy and paste and having those things ready to go.
We've got another question that came in for new users out of the box. How easy is it to access those benefits that you've spoken about today, like automation, reporting? The reports sound amazing. For initial setup, is that something a new user can put together, or is it something an admin can set up, but a standard user can maintain?
So the great thing is that there's almost layers to this. That the fact that it's one of, I'll address the idea of like a new user. I mean, I've been able to train people to deploy emails, build a list, deploy an email. And I mean, it takes maybe an hour to train. Don't quote me on that, but it's a very short and easy time to use this. Like it's the basic principles of like, okay, I need to find who I want to talk to. What do I want to say? I want to test to make sure it looks good. And then if I send out this information, what do I want to do with the results of it? And it's that basic and baseline of an understanding to say, great, that's how we build it. We do it with these automations, or we do it with this segment, and it's kind of easy to put together. From day one, the really cool thing about Pardot is that I talked about like cookie-based tracking. So what you need to do is in Pardot is that it's not inherently going to know that this computer belongs to Kevin, so everything that he does, we're going to be tracking that back and forth. You put a piece of code on your website, in those links I was talking about, or those files that you host, or in the communications, there's a piece of cookie-based tracking. It's the same way that like pixel tracking that Amazon, Google, everyone uses. So it's not like it's some kind of nefarious thing that's going to break websites, but that cookie-based tracking from day one, as soon as you sign your contract from Pardot, your install's up and running, you take that code, you put it onto your website. From the exact moment that goes live, you're tracking everyone who's on your website. You're tracking them when you send your first email, blast your whole database. 50,000 people, you signed up for Pardot. It starts on Monday. On Wednesday, send a newsletter and send it to everyone that you have, and just start to tie in the digital record, the digital footprint with your prospect person inside of Pardot, which then goes back up to Salesforce. So then you're tracking everything right away. Like that's the first thing that we do whenever we go into a completely new Pardot install. It's like, get the tracking code on your website and let's find a way to send an email as soon as possible. Once you make those ties, then it just all kind of works in the back end. Let me make sure I'm gonna read that question again, because I know that I get distracted on this thing. So yeah, the automations on those, like it's very basic to be able to do that, especially on the automation side. It doesn't require anyone to do any interaction with your website. On the automation side, if you have those records inside of Salesforce, if you just have people's first name, last name, company, and business address, state, whatever like the minimal fields that you have for creating a record inside of Salesforce, you can run an automation and start to segment on those people. It's very basic from just, you need to have an email address, and that's really about it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. You know, one of the things that is pervasive amongst people in the life sciences industry is we all love data. And Pardot gives us so much ability to work with data. And I think what you've done today was give us a really good example of how this can apply immediately to this industry. And so I want to thank you on behalf of Cloud Adoption Solutions. If you'd like to reach out to Kevin, his email address is khospodar@steadystatemedia.com. You can see that there. We have another exciting webinar coming up for you on December 15th. We've got a powerful panel of people who have loads of different experience in the life sciences industry. They will be answering a few questions about what 2023 is going to be bringing for our industry and how that will impact Salesforce.com. So you can understand the plans you should be making based on the things that we are seeing happening in the life sciences industry. We're going to be thinking like futurists and giving you a little glimpse into that. Thanks for joining us today. We're so excited that you spent some time with us. The recording will be available and we'll send it out to everybody who attended. And we will also send you more information about our exciting Lunch and Learn and live Life Sciences Dream In series that will be coming in 2023. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks, Kevin.